All right, so in this chapter, we're going to be focusing on workplace and organizational communication. So we'll be looking at both a little bit of the interpersonal communication that takes place in the workplace, meaning the conversations you have with your friends or coworkers, your bosses, your subordinates, so on and so forth. But then we'll talk about organizational communication in terms of how groups organize and affect organizational change and culture. So first, we'll define both. So, workplace communication is the communicative exchanges occurring between people within a workplace aimed to accomplishing workplace goals and objectives. So, this is the actual interpersonal level of communication where there's exchanges between people. And the whole purpose of this is to basically focus on the goals and objectives and to get things done within the workplace. Whereas organizational communication gets more at the idea of organizing. And what organizing kind of captures is the process through which workplace members develop, maintain, and modify workplace practices and culture. So the main difference between these two is workplace communications are kind of the more mundane, over and over occurring exchanges between people to get things done. Organizational communication is more of a deeply rooted process where there's actual development, maintainment, and modification of how workplace practices take place and how culture is ultimately changed or maintained. There's different types of communication networks. There's formal and informal patterns of communication that basically link everybody together in any kind of organization to which they belong. Formal are prescribed and sanctioned by the workplace. This is where things like chain of commands or hierarchy or rules and regulations and policies and procedures following communication and interaction take place. So there's downward communication in some organizations where it's basically the CEOs and the people up top delineate things and rules and expectations down to managers, and then managers, take it one step further down to the people working on the ground level. And there's not a whole lot of room for people at the ground level to provide feedback or say their opinion or state their opinion or basically contribute to the way things are run in the organization. Whereas upward communication is a little bit of the opposite of that. It's where organizations really value the people working at the ground level, the worker bees, if you will. They want to know their opinions. They want to know their thoughts on things. They want to know their ideas, and then they promote those ideas and those concerns being communicated from the ground level up, all the way up to the most important or most powerful people in the organization. Horizontal communication basically gets a communication going back and forth and kind of all over the place. This is where department to department can communicate with one another. Some organizations, there's a distance between like sales and marketing departments, for example. Organizations that promote horizontal communication have a very open culture where those in marketing can speak with those in sales and vice versa. So these are formal things. These are things that are ascribed, they're sanctioned, they're institutionalized, they're almost rules, and they're governed by rules and regulations in the workplace and cultural norms. There's also informal networks, though, and these are social interactions between coworkers, and they emerge from organizational activities. This is kind of like the small talk, the cooler talk, the other types of interactions that aren't necessarily governed by rules or institutionalizations or anything like that. It's just kind of your more informal exchanges, the social interactions you have between your coworkers, kind of the more quote unquote friendly types of interactions that you have with your coworkers and the people in the organization to which you belong. There's different communication channels, or there's different mediums through which we use communication and engage in communication. There's face-to-face. We have small groups, there's training sessions, there's one-on-one interactions where we communicate face-to-face. There's written communication where things are put in letters and memos and posted on bulletin boards and things like that. We have mediated communication where there's cell phones, internet, email, all those kinds of things. And then there's mass communication in workplaces as well, where we get newsletters, we get listserv emails sent to us. There's just mass communications that everybody takes place in. So there's a variety of communication channels within any workplace. There's what's called a communication climate in any kind of organizational communication setting. And this is relative acceptance or rejection perceived by workers based on relationships established in the workplace. It's basically how much you agree with the organization you're working for, how much you like your job, how much you value your work, how much you're into what you do, versus how much you just don't agree with many things and you're not really liking what you're doing and you don't really have a strong relationship with your workplace. They're supportive. This is where worker contributions are welcomed and valued. There's climates there where organizations want their people to give them feedback, provide them feedback, voice their opinions. But then there's also defensive workplaces where worker contributions are neither welcome nor valued. This is where the top players in the organization kind of think to themselves, this is how I want it to be, this is how it should be, and people are either going to jump on board and go along with how we do things around here, or they can go find a job elsewhere. There's different communication practices in the workplace, one of them being communicate workplace culture. This is essentially the knowledge, beliefs, values, behaviors, and practices that influence how members think and act, and it's communicatively created by members. We've talked about culture before on like a broader scale, whether that's at a national level, a state level, or whatever. Workplaces, organizations, businesses, they all have their own culture as well. There's different things that they value. There's different behaviors that are expected to take place. There's different practices that you're expected to engage in. There's certain things that you're just expected to do because it's quote unquote how things are done around here. That's workplace culture. And these things are they're created by each individual that's in there. You might go into a workplace as a new employee and you might not think you have a whole lot of influence on how things are done. But when you share your ideas, when you plant seeds in people's brains, when you behave a certain way, people see that and they recognize that. And that's why organizational culture is this ever-evolving, always changing thing. It's never static because each individual plays such a significant role in creating that culture. So workplace culture, a huge practice that's constantly in flux at organizations. Sometimes it's stable, sometimes sometimes it doesn't change a whole lot and it seems to stay pretty static. Some organizations such as Google, they change all the time and they're always implementing new and fun and exciting things because it's just new and creative. So this stuff varies in organizations, but there's always going to be a culture and communication is always going to influence that culture. There's also artifacts. These are the visible and tangible characteristics of an organization. So these are symbolic elements such as what kind of things are hung up on the wall, what kind of artwork is in the organization, what kind of things are just presented all over, what kind of symbols are laid out. What are some role elements, meaning what roles do people play? What are the interactive elements? How much do they promote communication? How much do they not? What are the contextual elements? What are the different parts of the context of the workplace itself? And then there's also espoused beliefs and values. This is when you basically talk about what our strategies are, what our goals are, what our philosophies, what are our mission statements, what are our value statements. These are all the things that we say. These are all the things that organizations explicitly state about themselves. And these are intended to be created to guide work behavior and to guide people in terms of accomplishing their work and doing their work the right way. We have underlying assumptions about the organizations in which we work for. When we go into somewhere, we kind of have underlying beliefs about what they are, what they do, and what to believe about the organization. We have taken for granted beliefs, perceptions, and feelings about yourselves, your coworkers, and your workplace. These are all considered underlying assumptions. We gather impressions of workplace culture, and this differs between people. Some people might see a culture of an organization as very fun, very friendly, very open, whereas somebody working in the same organization may see it as closed, cold, and not really that fun or friendly at all. And single artifacts do not provide an accurate description of a workplace. There could be artifacts all over the place. Not just one of them is going to determine everything. So it's important that we take in the full context in which you're situated. Be aware of the different things going on around us. Be aware of the different ways rooms are set up and the different, mission statements, all that kind of stuff. We need to be aware of all these different things, the way people dress, the way that organizations present themselves. We got to take all of these into consideration to actually understand the workplace in its entirety. Workplace socialization is basically when you enter into a job or you enter into a new workplace or you move to a new organization. This is the process by which you learn the values, norms, and required behaviors of the workplace. So for those of you that have had jobs, I'm assuming most of you had a job at some point, You know that feeling when you start a new job and you're just like, all right, I don't have a clue what I'm doing, and you're kind of just getting not used to only what your role is and what you're supposed to be doing for the job, but just how to interact with people, how to present yourself, how to, express ideas, how to, know when to be on time, and just kind of how, again, things are done around here. It's through socialization that you come to learn all of these things. And there's three stages. There's anticipatory stage. This is where you explore the job possibilities. What is it all about? What can I do? Kind of what are the functions and the processes by which people do this stuff. The next is the assimilation stage. This is where you're actually integrated into the culture. These are where all the communications and trainings and processes and job shadowing and all that kind of stuff takes place, where you're actually integrated into the culture and you become one with the organization. You become a factor. You become a gear in the overall mechanism of the organization. And then last is the exit stage. This is where you're leaving the workplace. You are no longer a part of the organization. You kind of just detach yourself from that organization. There's workplace dissent, and this takes place when workers no longer feel like a vital part of the workplace. They express disagreement, and they also have contradictory opinions. There is different ways of handling this type of dissent, though. Some individuals use upward dissent. They share their concerns with the workplace directly. They go directly to their boss. They go directly to their superiors. They go directly to their leaders. And they express how they feel. They basically express what their opinion is, where their disagreement lies, and they're open about sharing that stuff with the people they need to share it with. There's latent dissent. This is where you share this stuff aggressively with coworkers. Instead of going to the leaders and the people that can actually address your problem, you kind of just passively aggressively complain to your coworkers, and you just essentially vent to them. And then finally, displaced dissent. This is where you share concerns with people outside of the workplace. This is where you come home and complain about your job. This is where you talk to your friends outside of work about how awful your job is and the problems and the concerns that you have with work. So more time, you'll likely experience some sort of workplace dissent in your life. The key is try to use upward dissent. Try to address it with the people that can actually do something about it. Don't just vent and complain and piss and moan about it, because it's not really going to accomplish anything. And in fact, it could make things worse. Peer relationships take place in organizations as well. The workplace will likely always have friends in the workplace. Some people try to avoid this a lot. They don't really develop friendships in the workplace. Others of us have a lot of our best friends because we met them at the workplace, right? These are relationships that develop between two coworkers at the same hierarchical level. There's different kind of ways that we can think about these individuals as well too. There's information peer relationships. And these are people that we share day-to-day work info with. We share day-to-day work tasks with. We work alongside these people. So they're just kind of like points of resources for us for information. Then there's collegial peer relationships. This is where people provide job-related feedback while sharing work and family concerns as well. We don't just focus specifically on the task at hand at our job. We don't just use these individuals to get information and use as a resource at work, but we actually share a little bit about ourselves. We talk about things that are going on in our family. We talk about concerns at the workplace. We talk about things outside of our family and workplace that we do and our interests and things like that. And then kind of the most intimate level of special peer relationships. And these are the people at work that we provide emotional support. We confirm them. We provide personal feedback. We're essentially a friend to them as well. So there's different types of peer relationships in the workplace. Just know you'll probably run into and experience a variety of these throughout your careers. There's workplace friendships. Again, this is kind of more of a blend of personal and work roles. These are voluntary and they have a personalistic focus, meaning it's more about us as friends, and it's not just because we're talking because we work at the same place. And then romantic relationships. These can be rewarding, but they can also be really messy. There's a lot of pros associated with having a romantic partner in the workplace, but there's a lot of cons. And for that reason, a lot of organizations actually prohibit this. You cannot date or be married to somebody that you work with in the organization. So again, just be aware of your organization's policies and rules surrounding this kind of stuff, and just know that both for friendships and romantic relationships in the workplace, there's a lot of positives associated with them. You got emotional support. They can provide energy in certain ways because you can. There's just this positive aspect of knowing you have friends and your romantic partner in the workplace with you can make you more creative. You can experience more social support from people, but then at the same time, again, you're in the workplace, so your professional identity is also a part of it. So if something goes wrong in the relationship, hopefully there's not enough turbulence to where that actually comes into the workplace and affects your job. But you got to be very careful with these relationships for that very reason.